Morena, good morning. I am Trina Cook. I'm the General Manager for Popup, and today I'm introducing you to Steph Dixon, our Comms Manager. Thank you for making the time today to be part of the Popup pop-up chat today with Denise Garcia, talking about early communication with babies. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the Popup website. If you want to remain incognito, we suggest that you have your camera turned off, and we also ask that you mute yourself just to minimise any of that background chat as well. We will use the chat function, so please use that to ask any questions, and we will address those at the end of the session. And introducing Denise Garcia, she's had the honour of studying a Master of Educational Leadership and the joy of working as a community midwife, plus the pleasure of facilitating at Childbirth Classes for many years. She's a member on hospital boards and she works on community projects for Rotary. She's a mother of 6 amazing adults and 6 delightful grandchildren under 4 who keep her very creative and busy. Today she's sharing some thoughts and observations on communication from birth onwards. Basic communication with the mother can begin from the first skin-to-skin contact. A baby held close is comforted and reassured by hearing mum's familiar heartbeat, her voice, her smell. A baby tasting colostrum from the very first feed learns the texture of the soft nipple and breast in their mouth. If baby is content and warm, it can look up into its eyes in a mutual gaze. The first communication, no words needed. So Denise, I'll hand over to you and you start the presentation for us.
Yeah. Welcome everybody. Lovely introduction, thank you very much. Nice to see you all. We're just going to run through this little PowerPoint, and Steph will come in also and talk about her experiences of talking with her babies, which will be lovely. So we know that the baby can hear the mother's heartbeat from 18 to 20 weeks. We know that from sort of up to 28 weeks, 26 weeks onwards, they can respond to a really loud noise and they can calm down to the reassuring voice of their mum. So that's quite lovely. So here's a little story. I've got little anecdotes from some of my parents. I was relaxing in a warm bath at 28 weeks for an hour when my partner popped in, leant in really close to the baby and said, "Hello, little baby." And the baby who'd been asleep responded with big, large flips around her tummy. And she thought the baby might have been crying because it had been asleep and suddenly it was trying to like get away. So she put her hand on her tummy, you know, nice resting hand on there, and started talking to the baby to calm it down. So it was really interesting learning, and some of you might have experienced that if you've had pregnancies with babies suddenly responding to a loud noise. So we can communicate from that early stage of the pregnancy right through. Their senses are alert. They might be underwater with having sort of sounds googly or whatever, but they can respond to voices. And I think babies have a sense of how things feel as well, and they respond to your heart rate. So if you calm down and take some nice calming breaths, they'll often match your heart rate. So I sort of encourage health professionals as well to get on board and maybe start, you know, leading the way for parents. Because some people think, I feel silly talking to my baby. I don't, you know, it sounds like I'm talking to nothing. Or some other mums say, I walk around the house chatting away. There's no one here but me and baby. You know, and they walk around with their tummies out here, which is lovely. They're connecting quite early on. So for a midwife or a doctor, obstetrician, you know, when they come to do the checks and they often get consent from the mum to, it's okay to touch your tummy, check in with baby. Hi, baby. I'm just going to listen to your heartbeat today. How are you going? You know, and to do the heartbeat, because I'll often, when you put the little ultrasound on, zoom away a little bit and just say, oh, look, you're awake. You know, you're moving, your heart rate's 120, that's really good. Or, you know, your heart rate's a bit fast today, you're having a play. So what we find if we talk to babies and become more aware of their movements and awake times, the mother's more likely to respond if she thinks the baby's got quiet. And she'll give us a call and say, my baby's not being as active as it normally is, because usually in the evening, zooming around, but it's been quiet for the last 3 or 4 hours, what do I do? And then the midwife can, you know, appropriately respond and say, you know, sit there, put your hand on your tummy, look, maybe we'd better come in and have a little listen and a check. So if we can engage the mother in the fact that this is not just something she's carrying around, it's actually a baby who responds to sounds and noises, voices, touch, all that sort of thing, it can be quite good for all of us. So it's a really good thing to think about encouraging, if you've got other children, to talk to that baby or sing to the baby, or a partner or a dad, whoever, or another mum. Wait till the baby's awake, and then you can have a little 5-minute or 10-minute story or a song or something like that. What babies are doing is hearing those sounds. They might recognize the same stories when they've been born. They'll definitely recognize the same music. It can be quite calming. So if there's a sudden, like I've had a mum, I was at her house and she said, I'll put the jug on and make a cuppa, and put something in the gurgler down the sink and sinkerator, and suddenly the baby started leaping around. Because if anyone really listens to that sound that we take for granted, it's really, really loud. So then, I said, oh, look, just calm that baby down. Just put your hand on its tummy and tell the baby, I'm sorry, I should have warned you. There's a loud noise coming up. Or just give them a little bit of a nudge so that they're aware. Because can you imagine being really deeply asleep and suddenly there's this huge noise and it's like, whoa, what's that? And the baby's heart rate responds, and then they start to move around and do all that jerky stuff. So just to be more aware. And I have had mums ask me, oh, we're going to go to a concert. Is that a good idea? And I go, well, how loud's the music going to be? Because they can be really, really, really loud. And the babies will be hearing all this, sound. And babies can get overwhelmed pretty quickly with things going on. They often go to sleep. So just to think about things a little bit more consciously. What we do know is that the skin to skin, at the birth, this is the start of the out of body, for the baby that's come out of the mum's body at the first start of the communication. It's just amazing. Babies lie here, they listen to the heart rate, they feel the warmth of the mum, they can hear voices louder sometimes, because sometimes they've still got water in their ears, a little bit like when you've come out of the swimming pool. But they're really reassured because that's that same heartbeat that they've had. So, if we can keep the baby with the mum as long as possible, it makes a huge difference. So, one of the things that midwives love the most is that spark of meeting for the first time for a mum and its baby, or a mum and a dad, or a mum and a mum, or grandmum, so they look for that baby because they're really primed when they come out. If they've had a lovely birth and they've come out and they've got over that, where am I? Start to look around and they connect for that first time. That might be the only time you see them in a week, really awake and really looking. So it's an amazing magic moment for us. So encouraging the parents to do that, to look into their eyes, to put their phones down. I don't know how many times we say to our families, don't go to your phone. Take a photo if you want, but put it down. Don't let everyone know yet. Enjoy that first hour, that magical hour with that baby if you can. So this is setting baby up for communication for the very first time. And it's amazing because you are meeting that baby that you wondered whose eyes, whose fingers, how many, all that sort of stuff we do, the toes and things. And we've seen some amazing smiles from a newborn baby when it looks, it's like, oh, hey, hello everyone. So it's really cool. So babies have senses, and even for breastfeeding, it's learning. So all of it, we can see everything as a communication aspect to it. So they're having their first breastfeed, they look, they can't really make out too much. They know eyes and the eyebrows. The areola goes dark and we think it's because the baby hones on the different changes of skin color, and that's where it goes in for a feed. So it sees the brown area, areola. It can hear the mum's heartbeat. It can smell the colostrum or the milk. It's touching with its hands. It's touching with its skin. And once it gets that colostrum or milk, it's got, all the senses are engaged. So that's a lovely time for that baby to be there. It's getting filled. It's getting warmth. It's getting primed to learn. So the senses are not just the 5 senses. I think there's a sense of intuition or feeling that people have. When you feel something's not right or you feel something's really good. And I think this is important to go with that for the baby. So if they're looking a bit or feeling a bit tense, are they okay? Let's calm them back down and reassure them. That's what mums do. That's what families do. So I've had a couple of stories actually. One of the dads I visited, it was straight talking from that baby right from the get-go. He was talking in utero, to the baby. And he was also just right down at eye level with the baby and talking to it. It's going to change your nappy now. You're going to have a lovely sleep. What are you going to dream about? We're going to dream about this and that and some sheep and all this sort of stuff. He talks non-stop. And I was thinking like, wow, this is really interesting. Like he hardly stopped talking for an hour, and then the baby was back to sleep. But what it did was enhance that education, that learning for that baby. That baby could coo, you know, really early. It was doing big smiles. It was looking for that connection back with its parents really, really early. So I think people think, what do babies do? Nothing. We just feed them, put them back. We don't get anything too much back. If we look at them, if we smile at them, if we talk to them, we'll be surprised how quickly they can respond. All right, so just something to think about. I think the other thing with babies is that the environment is really important for them. You know, think about what's around, how much noise is around. I think I talked about that earlier with the incinerator and things like that. But a very quiet environment might be too quiet. You know, do they want to hear some reassuring sounds? Does that make them feel happier? You know, so have a look. You know, if you're a parent or helping a parent, you know, helping them to know and to look for what their baby needs, because every baby's different. I had one mum who said, oh, the baby's really happy in its room. It loves being in its cot. It seems to be its space, its safe place to go. So, you know, she would feed and play and talk and then see the signs of, you know, jerky movements and things like that, put baby to bed, happy baby. Other babies just want to be here, attached, carried and held. And it's all right for that baby, okay? So communication means making them feel safe and secure. So this is from the Raising Parent Australia website, you know, if we're going to teach parents about babies' cues. So, you know, doing that eye contact, if you can get a baby to look at you, you've got a baby. If you get, you know, you can look across the room and you can know how that baby feels. If they're looking at you from across the room, they probably want to be picked up. If, you know, if they're, you know, looking at someone else, you're engaged in what's going on. So these are some of the cues. If they're tense, they're squirmy, they're either really hungry or they've got some wind. So we look at body language as well. I was with a mum not long ago and she said, oh, the baby doesn't sleep. I don't know how to get it to bed. And she had the baby up over her shoulder and was patting it. And it was up over her shoulder like this and squirming. And then suddenly I saw its hand start to open and start to relax. And I said, you can put the baby to bed now, because it's gone from that tense stage to that relaxed stage. She said, oh, how do you know? I said, because now it's getting relaxed. So let's put the baby down and see if it goes to sleep. You know, so there's just looking at differences. For parents, it's hard because everything seems to be the same, a little bit like starting a new job. And it's not until you get into it a little way that you can see some of the differences. These are some babies that might be stimulated too much or need a break or getting tired, arching their back, looking away. It might just be that they don't want to be on the floor anymore. They're sick of looking around at the same thing, or it might be that they're getting tired. Here's some other tired signs. Some babies rub their eyes, it's very obvious. Some babies yawn. Some babies are stiff, jiggling. Other babies want to, you know, that when they're older, they often grizzle. Oh, what's wrong with you? Yeah, are they teething? Oh, those things like that. If you've got some communication going, they can say, which Trina's going to come in shortly and talk about. So this is another cue, sort of a clue to, you know, for conversation with babies. If they go, you go, back to them. So it's copying and reinforcing that they are learning how to talk. My little granddaughter's 5 months old and she was starting to try and make some sounds on the weekend, and immediately just copy them back, and then she copies them back, and then we copy them back, and then we get more interaction going. The other thing I noticed with my granddaughter, who lived with us for quite a while, she would look at what she wanted. So if she was thirsty once she was on solids, if there was a cup sort of sitting there, she'd be looking at that cup and then keeping looking at it. And I'd say to her mother, I think she's telling you she's thirsty. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, she keeps looking at that cup. So she brings her in, puts her in and feeds her. Oh, she was thirsty. So they'll often look for things, you know, if we're looking at them as them looking at us, we'll start picking up what their cues are. You'll see when you start eating and the 5-month-old or 6-month-old starts looking at what you're doing intently, that they're probably getting ready for solids and things like that. So communication is all about watching and observing and taking some action. So I've got this one here. I think some of you might have seen this. You know, for a lot of us, it's a raised eyebrow. It's a smile. You know, if you look at yourself in a mirror and you do a big smile, if you do that with a baby, they'll often reflect that back. If you frown, they'll often think, oh, I've done something wrong. Who thinks that when someone frowns? So, you know, they're already good at body language, babies. They're picking up looks. So if you can teach your baby, your toddler, to smile, it's one of the best gifts you can give them. Smile as a pathway opens many doors for the rest of their life. It's what we do when we meet people. It's what we do to make people feel relaxed and at ease. It's a vital social skill. So if we can practice smiling at the baby from the get-go, even though they may not smile back, and when a baby does that, I do this to them, and that teaches them these are the muscles I need to use to smile, and they'll often do, and then they get it, and you reinforce it, and then you're away. So yeah, and it's really hard, I think, if a mum is a little bit depressed or someone, to smile because you're not feeling like it. But if you can practice, even if you've got to get a mirror out and practice smiling, that baby's going to respond to that. And we know that smiling or laughing makes people feel happier, so that might help. So what I've learned really quickly is in the first week, parents are always asking me for advice. Oh, what do you think the baby needs? By about week 3 or 4, they're often telling me the baby's got a sore tummy or this is happening. So they're already learning and getting confident in communicating with baby, although baby doesn't talk yet. So yeah, just have a look around. A crying baby, very quickly, it's really funny because I say to my parents in childbirth classes, you know, when that baby's out, you've got no time to discuss the birth, you're suddenly a parent. And when the baby cries, we're all going to give it back to you. So what are you going to do with that baby that we pass back to you? And if we have to think, why do we give the baby back to the mum? It's because that very first moments of that skin to skin, that baby knows this is home. They feel safe here. So when anything's going on for a baby, they want to go back. So just to remember, it's really important. And then to share that out to other family members so that they get that trust with other people. So sign language is a really easy way of communicating with baby. I did this with my granddaughter that lived with us. She seemed to be very frustrated. So we started teaching her things. So when we saw that she was looking at the cup, I was working out, does she want water? And this is the sign for water. When she did it back, it was this, because that was all she could manage. So she'd be flapping at her head and someone would say, what's she doing? I said, oh, she wants some water. It wasn't until she was well over 1 that she could sort of get closer to here. But this one here is milk. Now this is the sign I teach my parents from the very first week, because the baby comes out like this often, you know, and then once it's fed, it relaxes. So in the first week, you probably won't see the baby with anything other than clenched fists until that milk is flowing well and it's getting really full. So I said to mother, what are the hands doing? They're clenched. Feed the baby. The baby's hungry, because they've only got tiny tummies in that first week and they want more milk, more milk, more milk, because they're getting little bits more often. So rather than us having big dinners, we're going to have snacks all day long. So the baby's going to be like this. So this is our communication. So this is the sign for milk. So it's the first one to teach your baby. And they very quickly do this with their little fists as soon as they can. So can I pass on to Steph, if that's okay?
Kia ora koutou. Ko Stephanie tōku ingoa. So I was diagnosed with postnatal distress when my baby was about 14 months old. Now I didn't have depression per se. I had anxiety and I had extreme frustration and anger. And most of that was because I didn't know how to communicate with my baby. or I could communicate with her, but she wasn't telling me what she needed. So I spent a lot of the first few months of her life talking to her, saying I was changing the nappy and I'm going to feed you, but she could never tell me anything back. And I wasn't I wasn't supported at the time to look for the cues and all this wonderful information that Denise is sharing. And about 6 months old, I was taught to teach the baby to sign milk. So I thought, well, I'll start from 6 months. And as I was teaching, I was thinking, well, this is useless. But I was going, milk, do you want some milk? Do you want some milk? Every time she fed. And about 8 months old, I was having an evening where I couldn't settle her. I was getting really ragey. I couldn't seem to work out what she wanted. She wouldn't go to sleep. So I handed her to my husband. I said, can you just take her away? I just need some space. And it was a bit later, I don't know how much later, but they walked back into the room, my husband carrying my 8-month-old, and they were both smiling. And I said, what did you do? He said, well, she has something to tell you. And I said, what? And he says, tell mummy what you want. And so my 8-month-old baby went, and I said, do you want some milk? And she went, and it was just that moment of, wow, I can talk to you. Oh, great, I can understand. I took her and fed her, and then she went to sleep. So it was a moment of absolute clarity, and I went, right, okay, I'm going to keep going with the signs. I was told to sign things that were going to be really helpful. So things like hurt, and all these signs came from baby sign, but again, as Denise said, this was a sign for more that I taught her, but she went like this. So more milk, or more food, or she'd point to something. And other ones were frustrated and help, and tired. I'd say, are you tired? Do you want to go to bed? So as we started doing these, I could hear her whining and whinging, and those previous sounds that really would trigger all this kind of rage building up in me, the frustration, I don't know what to do. I could say, do you want some help? And she'd go, as in, no, I'm frustrated. But if she wanted my help, she would have told me, she would have said help. So I could then switch off the, oh, I don't need to fix her. She's telling me she wants to fix it herself. Other things that happened were, we were at play centre one day, and it's a time that she'd normally be playing, and she wouldn't sleep, and she was grizzling, and nothing was going right. And I said, how can I help you? And she went, I said, you're tired. She went, and she wanted to go to bed at a time that she really didn't normally go to bed. So this two-way communication had such a massive impact on my mental health. And actually, as I was preparing for this video, I actually started to look through all my videos that I'd taken of her as a toddler signing. Now, I got diagnosed with PMD at 14 months, but that was about time that Anna and I started signing with each other, and she was telling me, and we were having communications, and that was the time I could finally let go of this intense anxiety that I couldn't fix my child. And it created, we had this great attachment and bond from birth, from the skin to skin and from the breastfeeding, but it got to that point where, as she was getting older, 6 months, 8 months, and starting to move and explore, I didn't know what she wanted, and I had huge frustration. So the signing definitely created this two-way communication between us. And once she had one sign, and then she went on to more, she could do cats and birds and airplanes, and she was telling me everything around in the world. And we remember counting, she had 220 signs by the time she was 2 years old, that she was just talking to people. So the attachment came back again with this toddler that was exploring the world. This communication, which ended all the frustration and the anxiety that I held. And the other thing was that out of our antenatal group, there were 4 of us decided to sign with our children at the same time. And we had this group where we try and help each other with our babies, but as soon as they were all signing, we could understand each other's children, so we could look after them and we could help them. And so we had these 4 babies, these 4 mums, and we're all signing and talking with each other. So the frustration goes, the communication starts, and it just does create this really great relationship.
That's really good, isn't it? Thank you so much, Trina. I love that story, and it's really pertinent today. I know with the granddaughter that I taught sign language to, her communication and language, she's only 2.5, you know, and I take her for a walk, you know, and we're walking up the street and she goes, oh, she calls me Nini, oh, Nini, it's such a beautiful day today. It's very peaceful. This is a 2-year-old. And I'm going, well, why do you say that it's peaceful? Because I'm thinking, like, has she heard this from her mother and repeating it? And she goes, the birds are singing, the sun is shining, and there's no wind today. You know, this is a 2-year-old, and this started because we had that communication way back from the before the 6 months when she was living with us, and she learned to sign for what she wanted. So I think you're sparking the brain, all the synapse gaps, all the neurons in here, that communication expands and expands. And what it also taught me is if we give them the tools to get their communication out, that frustration level drops in them. But also, they know so much more than we think they do. They understand it. I mean, I was looking after a mother with a baby recently, and the boy was 2.5 and not really talking very much. And I was comparing him to my granddaughter. No judgments. And the mother said, oh, he's not talking yet. I said, but what's he doing? And she was saying this and this. And I said, he's understanding everything you say. You know, so for some children, they may not articulate it, but as long as it's all happening in here and we can see that they're understanding, is really good. So I think sign is just something that we can talk and teach to our children. And it's really good that we can do it. My father was completely deaf, so we had our own sign language. And the advantage was I had 6 children and I had 2 dogs, and I thought, I can't yell because it's not going to have any effect, you know, on these big dogs. Does that make sense? The dogs won't know if I'm saying, come and get this from the kids or them. So I signed to my dogs and they understand everything I meant. And I could go, and they knew to go out, I knew down and things like that. So dogs are smart as well. So I had eye contact with my dogs and they would look at me and know what I meant. And this was a skill I learned from my mother because my father was deaf. She learned to teach us a lot of things with looking and, you know, so not just to say things, because of course we could talk to our father and nothing would get him. We'd have to stamp on the floor and the vibrations would get us. So we learned to look, and if he was looking at us, then we would talk. So we learned a lot about visual learning as well. So it's really exciting. I think it's very exciting, and it's really good that it connects in with New Zealand Sign Language Week this week as our 3rd language. So this was from the resources they've just put up online. This is a little baby talk for a deaf, but it's really good. You know, hungry is good, and, you know, full, more, you know, there's all sorts of signs that we can learn. I've been learning sign for only a couple of years. The hard part for me is getting over what we learned in our home, because it wasn't sign, it was our own sign language. So I've got to relearn things. But for our children, they just absorb everything we put their way. It's really worth it. So this is some more from that sign language resources that I've just put on here. You know, bath, cold. I think, Steph, you were talking about, you know, when you're going outside, you know, do you want to put a jacket on? It was really, I really like that story. You know, are they too hot? Are they too cold? They can tell you, can't they? Do you want to unmute, Stephanie?
Sorry, yes. I don't know if you can see my video. Yes, I would often find out exactly what it was that she needed by having that conversation. But it meant that I had to, when things were happening, so when she'd hurt herself, for example, I would often have to say, while she's hurting, does that hurt? Rather than fixing her straight away, is that hurting? Is that hurting you? Because so then she could associate, oh, this hurts me, and that's the sign that I need to learn for it. And then she could say things like, when she was moaning and wouldn't go to sleep, I said, what's the matter? Can I help you? She'd go, hurt, cuckoo. Oh, her tummy hurts. So I'd rub her tummy and she went to sleep. So yes, having all those signs, being able to tell you that.
Yep. And even the light, like if you put a child to bed and they don't want a dark room, you know, and they know that's light, you know. Oh, I want light. Okay, we might leave the door open a little bit, you know, those sort of things. And I put this one in here because if there's any health professionals here, this is a really good, you talked about hurt, you know, a really good one if you're dealing with people who may not be able to talk, who might want to know, are they okay? You know, are they sick? What's going on for them? You know, so it's quite good. So these are all resources from that website. If anyone's interested this week, there is a I Am Deaf Let's Talk taster class in Lower Hutt. So it's really good to do. So that's the end of the sharing. I'll come back to you. Did you get your video working, Steph? Or?
Yep, we're all good. If anyone's got any questions, now's the time to type those into the chat box. Denise is available and Steph's available here to answer questions. If anyone's got anything that they need to know, just great to have. Just, you know, these little bits we were talking in the office this morning, just that frustration that you feel not being able to understand what your baby needs. And, you know, you've tried a million different things, but it's probably just one little thing that you haven't sort of thought about or tried. And if they can let you know that, you know, your baby is your instruction manual, they're the ones that will tell you and give you the cues, and it's just understanding what they are trying to tell you.
There's a comment here from Jessica saying for some cultures a lot of noise is normal and reassuring, and it is reassuring. Some babies love lots of noises. Some babies like it a little bit quiet. So, you know, but I don't think very quiet, you know, is probably the wrong thing to have babies sleeping in an extremely quiet situation, because they get used to that. And then if there's any noise, and also if there's any teachers here, when they're going to school and they're learning, they've got to have it. There's a noisy environment. So having some noise, but well, I think I was talking more about the really sudden loud noises for a baby that doesn't know that that's an incinerator, or, you know, different things, the lawnmower, you know, and things like that. So just the sudden noises. Yeah, but singing to your baby, playing music. I know with my husband's family, they never had any music when they grew up at all. Whereas we had lots. Everyone in our family loves music, and everyone in my partner's family of 7 don't. It's interesting, isn't it? So what you have around will help you move forward. What was that other question?
Yeah, so from Rachel, she says, is it recommended that parents can use baby sign from day one? At approximately what age could parents expect to see baby making the milk sign, for example?
It's interesting because they do make milk signs, but they don't know they're making milk signs. And what we've noticed, you might have seen little photos of a baby that's well fed. And this is a baby that's not fed. You won't see a baby, you know, it's going to have its elbows up and its hands like this for food. So that's the same as that. So it's really important to teach the parents that, because we don't know when that moment is when that baby does that back to you. It might be earlier than you think. So I think encourage, because by encouraging communication, we are encouraging looking, observing, watching our babies for any response. My little 5-month-old granddaughter taught her to wave on the weekend for the first time, you know, so it was really quite interesting to see that. And I know with my 6-month-old, my son-in-law taught her to do a high five. So, you know, it's amazing what you can do with a little baby that you don't think they're going to do. But yeah, my dogs do high fives and all that stuff as well. So yeah, it's good questions. We're not experts. We're just learning from observation and sharing, really. If anyone has any other stories or anything that they can share.
Yeah, well, recognising New Zealand Sign Language Week, we have had a vignette made of our How Are You resource, which is available on our Facebook page and our part of website as well. So that's really great to be able to share with parents who might be suffering from a bit of anxiety or depression antenatally or postnatally. So it's great to have these resources available.
Lovely.
Great, Denise. Well, it looks like that is a wrap. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and for Steph as well for sharing great stories with her 2 kids. Just certainly helps to create that communication and just you know, reduce that frustration, and hopefully that can then help with the anxiety and depression that we often feel around having little babies around in our lives.
Changes them big time, doesn't it?
Yep. Great. Well, thanks everyone. Go
Thanks,
well,
everyone.
and yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.